This is part of my ongoing experimentation with oil feed pumps on this 1937 Harley Davidson Big Twin flathead. This is an 80 cubic inch motor. You can see here the return flow to the tank is what I would consider strong, acceptable. You can see bubbles in the oil down below in the tank too. A good sign as well, I would say. This is the reproduction aftermarket version of a Harley Davidson 2-vane centrifugal bypass feed pump. I'm taking temperatures here to show that the engine is fully warmed up to operational temperature. I'll show in a minute what the oil pressure is. This is with the 4-vane conversion kit, aftermarket 4-vane conversion kit in the aftermarket 2-vane feed pump. And you can see at idle, hot idle, it's 1 to 3 pounds, give or take, of idle oil pressure, which I would say is acceptable. Give it some revs. Oil pressure goes up a little bit. My understanding is you don't need much oil pressure on these old flatheads because they're, like most Harley Davidson V-twins, they're roller bearing motors and don't really need much. Just the bearings need to be wet is all. But you would still like to see maybe a little pressure. Okay, this is test number 2. This is with a real, genuine Harley Davidson feed pump. I bought a pump body off of Fleabay. I had all the guts to put in it to get it going. Someone had mentioned that, well, you can't really compare a reproduction pump to an original one. Well, this is an original one, all real Harley stuff, and as I expected, it makes zero pressure at hot idle. You can see the return flow in the tank is a little less, basically half as much compared to the aftermarket 4-vane feed pump that we were just looking at. It is returning some oil, so obviously it's pushing some into the motor. I think it's a fact that these big twin flatheads need more oil than a 45, but the question is exactly how much more. Here you can see the genuine Harley Davidson 2-vane pump on the left, and then an aftermarket repop feed pump on the right down there with the 4-vane rotor kit in it. Now this is the CHP Swedish gear rotor feed pump that I've been having a lot of trouble with. It makes fantastic pressure and flow, but so much so it usually pukes out of the breather. So I've tapped into the pressure regulation circuit here. You can see I'm idling at about 10 pounds. Before I did this, I was idling at 30, 40 plus. Give it some revs, it goes up a little, and then it goes back down to around 10 or so. Now, I was expecting oil to come out of this hose since it is tapped into the pressure regulation circuit. But for some reason it didn't, and that still kind of puzzles me. Maybe just the first few inches. You can see the oil return flow here is pretty similar to the 4-vane, aftermarket 4-vane feed pump. I was expecting oil to come out of that hose that I added because it's tied into the pressure regulation circuit. The only thing I can guess is maybe the first few inches of that hose have filled up, and that has allowed the pressure to drop such that it's not overwhelming the engine and causing it to puke out of the breather. And it's also not pumping so much into that hose that I've added that it's causing it to come out of the hose. My plan was to just tie that hose back into the oil tank, so any oil that was lost through there wouldn't really be lost at all. It would just be captured back into the oil tank. Some people have wondered why I have gone to all the trouble to try to experiment with different oil pumps on this motorcycle. And you know, someone said to me, well, how did it work back in the 30s? Well, back in the 30s, things didn't move as fast. There wasn't as much traffic to get stuck in at a stoplight. So the whole reason for this is to hopefully just try to make something that's a little more reliable for modern riding conditions. I'm not trying to ride this bike to the moon or anything. So that's my reasoning for that.